see this time less of you have come. Obviously now there's no place for children. So I think that's why some of the regular attendees are not here. But I'm concluding that those who have come are the really serious devotees.
There was also some misinfo. There was the poster that we are under construction, but not exact info that the Sunday program is called. So that's a little...
Okay. Anyway, still, those who have come here must be very serious. So, a few weeks ago, I was scheduled to give a talk on the Sunday feast about Mayavada philosophy, old and new. But unfortunately, I injured my thumb. Now it's getting almost okay again. I injured my thumb that very morning. Smashed it in the floor. So I had to go to the polyclinic and take painkillers and things like that. Good bandage. So I was not really in condition to do that lecture. So Mayavada Prabhu requested that I give it again today. So that's what I will do. So, to speak about Mayavada philosophy, we have to first of all talk about monism. And I'm bringing this up because some of you may be thinking, oh well, you know, this talk of these old philosophies, what do they have to do with us today? But actually these philosophies, Mayavada philosophy means philosophy of illusion, monism means the idea that everything is one. They're very, very much still with us. I have here this Scientific American, famous science magazine. And this is a recent issue of September. And we have an article here with a funny title, but you see, Mustangs, Monists, and Meaning. So, never mind the Mustangs and the meaning. The central word is monists. What is being argued here? And from this this one-page article, we can actually see what Mayavada philosophy is. He's this man, what's his name? Shermer, Michael Shermer. He publishes the Skeptic magazine. So he's saying that in our experience, everyone naturally is distinguishing between soul and body. We naturally do this. He mentions that we always say my body. Prabhupada used to do this. Prabhupada, in the early days when he was teaching those who were first coming in to him to understand the difference between the self and the body, he would often say, point to your hand, point to your leg, point to your chest, point to your head, point to your ear, your nose, different things. Then he would say, point to yourself, and everyone would become confused. Where is the self? After we have pointed out all different aspects of the body. So the self is the one who is pointing. You see, the self is the I, the essential ego. And in our ordinary life and dealings with one another, he's admitting here, he's a materialistic scientist, and he's admitting that in our ordinary life we're dualists. Dualist means we are accepting there's a difference between consciousness and matter. And then that, of course, what is the consequence of that? What final conclusion would we draw from that? We would have to draw that there is a non-material self, a soul, and it is associating somehow with material covering, which we call the body. So this is why he's using this term dualist. Dualist means two. What we are is a combination of two things. There's a soul, which is the real self, and then there's this body and even the mind. The mind is subtle body, and that is matter. But then he goes on to say that he thinks that, as he writes here, this dualist belief is very probably wrong. That's very interesting phraseology also. Very probably. What does that really mean? When you say probably, you're not saying it is. This is your opinion. You're saying it's stronger than chance, very probably, but he doesn't really know. So what he's doing is practicing the art of propaganda here. Whether there is soul, no soul, science is really unable to say, because science studies matter. Now there are many people who believe, like this Mr. Shermer, that all there is in life is just matter interacting and that creates consciousness. But that has never been proved. He talks about how one day in the future we may be able to reproduce consciousness by using like some very advanced computer technology. But that's a hope. So that is not science. Science means that which is proved. So what he's arguing here is a philosophy of monism. Monism means there's only one thing really, and that's matter. Now, of course, there's another kind of monism which I'm going to talk about. The classical Mayavada, Advaita Vedanta monism. That's another type of monism, but right now we're just keeping it simple and speaking about this scientific monism, which is very much with us. Take a look, here it is. Monists, you see, this is not some 1,000-year-old debate that we dug up out of the ground and brought before you like a dead body. This is going on very much today in the highest realms of intelligentsia in the world. So he's a monist, and he wants to say, in fact, there is only matter. We are just one thing, matter. And then what does that mean about this experience that he's talking about, that we all have? That I feel I'm different from matter. I say my body. I feel, my thoughts, my consciousness is something very, very, very internal. And I can see from this very, very internal position, I can see even the movements of my mind, and I can understand that's different from me, because sometimes our mind gets, for example, very disturbed, and then we don't like that. We wish this mind would get back into its proper condition. You see, so we're grappling with the mind, and the mind is not me. You see, and then what to speak of the body. So this is everyone's experience. You see, but if it's a fact that the reality is monism, that there's no difference between body and soul or consciousness and the objects of consciousness, then this experience that we have is illusion. You see what he's saying here? Everyone is instinctively a dualist. That means we're all an illusion. In fact, we're just matter, and it is wrong for us to think that we're something else. The self is different from the body. So this idea that everything is illusion, that our experience is illusion, this is what is called Mayavada. And Mayavada is always very closely intertwined with monism, some monistic belief. So when we talk of Mayavadi old, we want to talk about Mayavadi old and new. So I just gave you a little look into Mayavadi new. But we want to talk about Mayavadi old, then the starting point is Buddhism. So, Lord Buddha Dev, whom I think you know, we're all accepting him as an avatar of Krishna, who came for a special reason. At the time he came, the Vedic rituals were being misused, and many animals were being cruelly slaughtered in bloody sacrifices. And Sadaya Hridaya Darshitam Pashughatam, as Srila Jayadev Goswami says, Buddha with compassionate heart, he looked upon all these suffering living entities, these poor Pashus, animals being killed in the name of the Vedas, and he descended to stop that. So the way he descended to stop that. That's what he did. He stopped it. Just like if a child is making mischief, making too much nonsense, loud noise, breaking things, what is the first instruction of the parent? Stop. Stop. Sit down. Don't make trouble. Now the parent doesn't only want the child just to sit down for the rest of its life. The child will have the parent will have a further plan to engage the child in good activities, but because the child is so restless, you first of all have to say stop. So this is what Buddha came to do. Stop. Sit down. Meditate. And this is the essence of Buddhism. Buddhism is not, at least in its original form, it's not intended to be philosophical, really. Buddha taught a system of ethics, how people can purify themselves of sinful desire and then attain ultimately nirvana, the release of suffering. This is, when you go back to what Buddha taught, this is what he concentrated on. And then later on, after Buddha, and then others following him began to conceive different philosophies of Buddhism. And the Buddhist religion, you see, is very, very speculative. So you have different schools of Buddhism and very different conceptions. Much of Buddhism is atheistic. You can read Buddhist books where they will say, we don't believe in God at all. There's no God in Buddhism. But other forms of Buddhism are theistic. There's some idea of God. So it's very, very diverse. Why? Because there's been so much speculation after Buddha trying to understand what his teachings really are. But really Buddha was very vague when it came to these specific questions. Like someone was asking him, is there a soul? Is there a soul apart from the body? And is that soul eternal? And is this universe real? Or is it just a dream? Is the universe eternal? He was asking questions like that, and Buddha was simply silent. He wouldn't answer. And later he told his disciples, because if I would give answers to these questions, then my real purpose would be misinterpreted. What he wanted to do was just teach this basic moral system. So anyway, Buddhism has come to mean that just very much like modern science, the only thing that is there is matter. Buddhist philosophy very strongly tends to be what is called anatma, a doctrine of no soul. As I said, there are exceptions. There are some schools of Buddhism where they say there is a soul, and they even say there's an ultimate form of Buddha, a personal form, with a name like Mahavairocham, the great shining one, or the great sun Buddha. Like in Japan, there's one very old Buddhist school called Shingon. But this is in the minority. Basically, what you find whenever you read books about Buddhism or go to Buddhist countries is they don't accept that there's a soul, they don't accept that there's a God, and the only thing that is here is tattva, or and it's not tattva for them, but the only, let's say vastu, yes. if you like that word, possibly. The only substantial thing that there is matter. And this matter is Maya, means it's not real. You see? So in the ultimate examination, Buddhism is Shunyavad philosophy. Shunya means zero. It comes to the conclusion of nothingness. That this world that we're perceiving of matter is a big illusion. We're suffering because of it. We're suffering because we're going through birth and death again and again around the cycle of samsara. But it's not a soul that's going around the cycle of samsara. It's a false conception that I exist. That's all. It's not true. I don't exist. So, when by Buddhist meditation one hopes to achieve this nirvana, which means the extinction of the self, then there will be nothing. You see? It becomes a big zero, a void. So this is the goal. I think of much of Buddhism, most of Buddhism is aspiring to attain shunya or emptiness or voidness. You can hear many years ago, in the 1960s, the Beatles, in one of their albums, they had a song called Tomorrow Never Knows. John Lennon wrote this song. And he was borrowing ideas from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And you hear in the words, turn on, tune in, surrender to the void. It is shining. So, this is a call to merge into the void. So, this is the Buddhism, and this is the first chapter of what we call Mayavada philosophy, the philosophy of illusionism. That everything we're experiencing is simply a big illusion. That and the Mayavada sense of illusion is that it has no reality at all anywhere. You see? And when we stop this illusion, there will be nothing. So then after Buddhism spread in India and became prominent, then a great Vedantist acharya named Shankaracharya, who is still very, very revered in India today, Adi Shankaracharya. So he came forward to teach the Advaita version of Mayavada. And this philosophy is very, very close to Buddhism, in that it still views the whole world as being nothing but a big dream with no foundation anywhere. But when one goes beyond the dream, then there is Brahman. But this Brahman is nirvishesha, means it has no quality. It's more or less a big blank light, and the true self is that Brahman. So we all have this sense of self that I exist, and that is belonging to the Brahman. What we really are is we are that Brahman. So we have to dissolve this present perception we're having, where I'm a person in this world with many other persons around me. We have to dissolve all that, and then we just merge into this original self, which has no quality except consciousness. There's no name, form, quality, activity, relationship, any of that in Brahman. So this is called nirvishesha, no qualities, or nirakar, no form. So this form of Mayavada is, well, Buddhism is still prominent in the world too, and people are all around the world are interested in Buddhism, but Buddhism is largely a very spent force in India. There are a few Buddhists still there, but Buddhism had to leave India, go to China when Shankaracharya began his mission. So what we have in India now is a lot of these Advaita Mayavadas. And practically the religion known as Hinduism, that is the background of it. Because the idea that everything is really illusion, what does it mean? It means also that the forms of deities, like here we worship Shri Gaura or Radha Krishna, or any deity form, that is also illusion, ultimately. And so if the form of God is an illusion, then it doesn't matter what kind of deity you worship. So in Hinduism, you see, you have this like juggling of deities. That, alright, you worship Vishnu, but I worship Ganesh. And he worships Durga, and he worships Shiva, and he worships someone else. And it's all on the same path to Brahma. In the end, we'll all realize that these deities are one and then nothing. And there will only be that self with the capital S left. You and me will all just merge together into one self. Now, yes, many people are fascinated with this type of thinking. Why? Because it's in the Western world today, it's a kind of easy way out. It seems very mental. You know, it's something that operates on the mental or intellectual platform. And you just have to look at the world and negate it. Just imagine it's not real. And I am everything. You see, this is very appealing to people. I don't have to surrender to any higher God. I am actually God. You see, but if you consider the consequences of thinking that way, they're not very auspicious. I mean, you take the germ of that philosophy, I am God, and all of this is unreal. It doesn't matter what I do here. Take the germ of that philosophy, that conception. You'll find it in people like Adolf Hitler too. Someone like Hitler was thinking he was God, and the world is just there for him to play with, do whatever he likes. And he was very successful at it for a time. He had many, many millions of people, intelligent people, European people worshipping him. That he's their Führer, the leader of us all. And even I've seen a book where they were referring to Bhagavad Gita. Some German scholar that where Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, he comes to restore the proper dharma. That is our Führer. So, I mean, if you take this Mayavada philosophy, what is wrong with that? How can you find fault in that? You see, here's someone powerful comes along and thinking that he's God, and how do you defeat? You can't. Because actually, this Mayavada philosophy is really the essence of materialism. It's the same basis of materialism. That the world is here for me to play with. It's not, because Krishna says this in Gita, asatyam apratishtante jagat ahurinishwaram, that the asuras, the demons, they view this world as asat, means not real. Apratishtam, it has no foundation. And jagat ahurinishwaram, there's no Ishwara, there's no God who controls this world. So we're just free to do what we like. So in Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, this is said to be the philosophy of the demons, and when you look at Mayavada philosophy, it's very, very difficult to distinguish where you're going to put the difference, draw the line of difference between the two. But actually, there is a way you can differentiate. And this is the thing that is being ignored in the world today among modern people who are fascinated by this Mayavada philosophy, is that if we look back at Lord Buddha and Sripad Shankaracharya, who were they? They were great, great, great saintly persons. They were strict renunciates. Shankaracharya was formerly a sannyasi, and in Buddhism too. They become monks, and that is also called sannyas. They wear a significant type of dress to indicate that they're not involved in enjoying the world. And Buddhism is actually, if you become a Buddhist monk, it's very, very strict. Like we say, if you want to become a Hare Krishna, you have to agree to follow 4 regulative principles. But in Buddhism they have something like 253 regulative principles, including our 4 regulative principles. So, it's very, very strict actually when it's practiced in its original form. So this was, you see what is the idea of Buddhism and the Shankaracharya's Advaita philosophy, was to capture materialistic-minded people. A philosophy was taught that would capture them, that would interest them. And yet they were put on a very, very strict spiritual path, so that they could actually make spiritual advancement, even while keeping to this idea that it is all one, I am God, everything is illusion, nothing matters, like that. So this is a kind of, at least from our point of view, Vaishnava point of view, that this was a kind of transcendental trickery, that the mission of Lord Buddha and Shankaracharya are not actually understood by the Buddhists and the Advaitas. They don't really understand what these great teachers came to teach. They actually came to teach people, to make spiritual advancement, so that later on they could understand what God really is. So you see, this is when we say Mayavada philosophy, old and new. So old Mayavada philosophy is a philosophy of renunciation, monasticism. It is a philosophy of withdrawing completely from the world. And by this utter renunciation of sense pleasures, in this way, one can purify one's consciousness and realize that the idea is that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. You see, that's there. If you aspire to realize shunya, void, then that means you're not the body, you're not the mind. And that's progress, that's good. Because someone who just thinks, I am the body, I am the mind, this is like the animal platform of life. And then Shankaracharya was taking them even beyond that. Rather than just negative definition, I'm not this, I'm not that. There is something I am, and that is Brahman, which means pure spirit. But that definition of Brahman was very unclear. That was all. He was just showing that there is something beyond this Buddhist void. There is something beyond which is eternal and which is full of bliss. And you should realize yourself there. So if Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta are understood in that way, then you see actually there are paths of progress. Now the problem is in our modern time is that these philosophies have been, especially in the Western world, they have been broken away from the discipline. So, you meet people who say, I'm a Buddhist. How they live their life may have very little to do with traditional Buddhism. Or someone may say that he's following Advaita Vedanta or some path of Hinduism that leads to Brahman. But there again too, they may not be following anything. Very often you see they're not really following strictly, they're not adhering to the principle of renunciation. So therefore you see in more modern times, everything becomes again on the platform of imagination. Just a mental thing, that all I have to do is think nothing is real and then it is not real. But no. So now we want to go from there, talking about the Mayavada philosophy, to our Vaishnava philosophy. So Vaishnava philosophy also speaks about Maya, illusion. But this is an illusion that is founded on a definite reality. In other words, take your experience in this life. We often experience being illusioned. Now how does that work? I'll give you one example I heard from a godbrother of mine. He was in South America with some other devotees, and they were going up, it was in the mountainous part of South America, so they were going up in the hills to one house where they had been invited to stay and give a program, some village way up. And it was hard to find this place. They were looking for a village, and they knew there would be lights. It had already become dark, and they knew that there would be lights They would see lights in the distance. And that would be the village. That's all they knew. So he told me, we turned around the corner on this mountain path, and we saw in the distance lights. And we thought, oh, there it is. But then they realized after a couple seconds that these were just fireflies, these glowing flies. And they were just hanging in the air there, in the darkness. And they mistook that to be a village. So that's an illusion that we can understand that that's an illusion. You see? Now how does it work, this illusion, this Maya? It's a matter of confusion. That there is something real, a village, that we want to go to, and that will have lights. But we have mistaken something that's not a village to be that village. You see? The reason we're in illusion is because we're thinking this thing that is not the village, the swarm of fireflies, is the village. That's why we're in illusion. You see, so there must be a reality behind the illusion to make the illusion work. Like with counterfeit money. So someone in their cellar is printing up 100 euro notes, you see, and he's very skilled. So he's made them look just like real euro notes. So he goes out and he buys things with this money. The people who take it are in illusion. Why? Because this is not a real euro note. But they think it is falsely, and therefore they're in illusion. You see, so at the background of this illusion, there's the real euro. You see? So, if we want to say this world is illusion, at the back of it somewhere there must be a real world. You see? There must be, and in this world we see, there is variety, there is color, there are persons, there are activities. Everything has a shape, a form. Everything has a purpose. Now that may all be illusion. But the fact that it exists like this, looking like this, must mean that at the back of it there's a reality that also has name, form, quality, activity. Now that we can understand clearly, that's what an illusion is. I mean, if you want to say that no, illusion means that there's absolutely, it has no basis in any reality, it's a total fabrication, there's nothing behind it, then how does that work? It's like if I have my counterfeit money printing press, and I go downstairs, and I print up some money of my own design. I just invent something, and I call it a gribble. You see, I print up 100 gribble notes. And then I go to the shop, and I, come there with big bags of groceries, and I set them down at the cashier, and I take 100 gribble note out. And she's going to say, what is this? Get out of here. We want euros, we don't want gribbles. That won't be illusion. This gribble note has no basis in reality, so it can't fool anyone. See what I'm saying? No one can be fooled by it. It's just something weird, So this is the problem with this monistic philosophy. Monism means there's only one thing. We say this matter or Brahman beyond it. There's only one thing. Then if there is really only one thing, then where does the idea that there is more than one thing, plurality, duality, where does it come from? How can it exist? It's just like saying that there's only one taste, or there's only one color. And where do all the other colors come from? You see? So this is the problem of Mayavada philosophy. If you reduce everything down to one, then you have difficulty to explain where everything has come from, all this variety. So the Vaishnava philosophy says that yes, Brahman, we also accept that the absolute truth is called Brahman, or more properly, Param Brahman, which actually means the supreme source of everything. Brahman means the source. So, but this source of everything is not of the nature of void or, slightly dressed up void. This is what the Advaita Vedanta does. It slightly dresses up the Buddhist shunya by saying it's consciousness is there, light is there, jyoti, but no form, no activity. No, that will not explain. You see? If you want to say, if we want to understand that this world is somehow, because Mayavadis use this argument in trying to explain where this Maya comes from, they will say, well, this material world is a kind of reflection of the Brahman. Alright? Actually, in our philosophy we say that too. But the problem is, if you say that this Brahman has no form, is just jyoti, light, then what will be reflected of it? You see what I'm saying? If it is reflected, you're also only going to see light. You see? Just like if sometimes when the sun is rising behind you, and you're walking in the city, then in the windows of the buildings in front of you, you get blinded because the rising sun is coming up behind you. It's very intense light coming into your eyes. So you get that's a reflection of the sun. It has the same quality. You see, it's blinding red light. It doesn't reflect as a whole world full of people walking. You don't see a whole new world in the windows of the buildings. Some magical new world that you never saw before suddenly appearing in all the windows because the sun is rising. This is the nature of reflection. Reflection means it reflects what's there, not something else. So the Vaishnava philosophy says yes, that is Para Brahman, Supreme Brahman, that is the origin of everything, and this world is a reflection of that. But because we see variety in this world, we see personality in this world, form in this world, plurality in this world, means many individuals. All of that is coming from Brahman. All of that is within Brahman. That is the nature of Brahman also. And what is the difference? The difference is simply that here, it is temporarily manifest. Just like another example is to say the material world is the shadow of God. So the material world has form because God has form. Now when we think of shadow is affected by changes of circumstances. You see, like at night. Now it's nighttime. If you go out into the pitch darkness of nighttime, away from any light, you won't have a shadow. Your shadow won't be there because everything is shadow, everything is dark. Or at noontime when the sun's right overhead, then your shadow is just a circle underneath you. You see? And when the sun is on one side or the other side, then your shadow is long. So you see, the shadow changes. It changes according to time, place, circumstance, and sometimes it seems to be not there at all. So that's the nature of this world. Yes, the world comes into being, it exists for some time, it goes through transformation, changes, then it disappears, and then it reappears again. This is how the Vedic Shastra describes the origin of the world. So the world is, yes, a shadow energy, Chaya Shakti. This is the term used in Brahma Samhita. Chaya Shakti, shadow energy of God, of Krishna. And therefore this world is so attractive to us because Krishna, what does Krishna mean? All attractive. Krishna is all attractive, so his shadow energy is similarly all attractive. And you can get lost in this energy. It may just be a shadow, it may just be a reflection, but it is the power of God, and it has the power to absorb us completely. You see, this universe, we don't know the end of this universe. Jagrata Vichitra, this universe is full of endless wonderful forms, and one can get completely lost in it. And this is the lesson in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, Vishvarup Surupam, the universal form. Krishna is showing that this wonderful universe comes out of him. You see? So how can something so wonderful come out of a blank, out of a zero? You see, as they say, you can't get something from nothing. And this is very true. Creatio ex nihilo. This is a term. Creation from nothing. You see, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat or something. But if that was a fact, if creation did work like that, something coming out of nothing, something coming out of anywhere, then we would see that now. And that would be logical. If that was really the origin of everything, then why don't we see, cows giving birth to fish, or, human beings hatching out of birds' eggs, or things like that. If everything just comes from everywhere, like they say, everything is everything. I remember when I was young, in the hippie era, that was a very common expression. Everything is everything. So if everything is everything, then why don't people hatch from chickens' eggs? But everything has a logical, you can trace back, there's a logical origin to everything. Everything is coming out ultimately from one source, in a very systematic way. And that is Krishna. So in this Mayavada philosophy, you see, there's a good aspect, as I said. It is, the purpose of it is actually to detach people from their absorption in ignorance, in thinking I'm the body, and thinking that enjoyment means only sense pleasures of the body. So it is a very kind of extreme form of asceticism in its original form. Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta saying all of this is not real, you have nothing whatsoever to do with this, and you should just become a monk, or Buddhists also have nuns, monk or nun, and just live a very, very, very simple life, just following so many principles, and not become at all involved with this world. And in this way, reduce yourself, reduce it down, your ego, reduce it as much as you can. The goal will be zero. You see? But in order to really do this, then we have to have something positive. That's a negative measure, as I said. That's what you tell a child when the child is very misbehaved. Stop. Don't do this nonsense. But you can't tell a child that all the time. That can't be the only instruction you give a child. Hey, stop. Stop. Child's trying to read a nice book. Stop. Child's trying to do something nice, and you say also, stop. That's not very healthy. So there has to be discrimination. The child should be stopped from naughty activities, but then encouraged to perform good activities. And so this is what followed after in India, the evolution of philosophy from Buddhism to Advaita Vedanta. Then there appeared the great Vaishnavacharyas, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarka, Vishnu Swami. These great acharyas came to teach the positive spiritual discipline of bhakti, of devotion to the Lord. And the good aspects of the Mayavada, whatever is good in that, is retained in the Vaishnava philosophy. In that, yes, this world is illusion in the sense that if we think this is my world, if we think that the purpose of my being in this world is simply to enjoy, that is definitely Maya. That is Maya, that is illusion. But the substance of the world itself is not Maya. That substance is Shakti, is the energy of God. And so we have to learn to properly use this energy. This is the difference. You see, again, that's another comment. I'm giving all these kind of very ordinary examples to make these points clear. So, father of a family, he has a car, and teenage son, he likes to drive the car. So the car is Shakti, the Shakti of the Father, the energy of the Father, his potency. So Father says, all right, yes, you're my son, you can drive the car. But when the son gets in the car, he starts to think, this is my car. He doesn't remember this is Father's property. And he starts to drive it as he would like, very fast. You see, spinning the back wheels, making smoke, and fishtailing down the road with, squealing tires and all of that. And then he has an accident, and he smashes the car up. And he has to go back and say, Daddy, I wrecked the car. And what does the father say? Well, I'm not going to let you drive. You see, this is again like Buddhism or the Mayavada philosophy, Advaita Vedanta philosophy. Stop, sit there. You can't drive. You see, but this kid has to grow up. He has to take his place in the adult world. He's getting older, so you can't maintain that forever. That you can never drive ever again. Maybe for 6 months, 1 year, but at some point he should drive. But now he should drive nicely. Now he should have learned something from that bad experience of smashing the car. Now he should drive, remembering this is not my car. This is my Father's car. I have to take nice care of it. You see, so this is the Vaishnava principle. That this energy does not belong to me. It's not there for me to do what I like with it, and then at the end say, anyway, it's all illusion, and just, with a wave of the hand, it's all just illusion. It doesn't matter what I did. That's again why some people are attracted to this philosophy, because people do bad things in life, sinful things, and they get worried. What does that mean for my future if I commit these sins? But you take this neo-Mayavadi philosophy, and they can just with a wave of the hand, it doesn't matter what you do. It's all just a dream anyway. And this is what's demoniac. This is what's like the demons. This is what the demons do. They will not take responsibility for their activities. But this energy is Krishna's energy, and we have to learn to use it properly. And this is what the Vaishnavacharyas have taught. And then that is the way to become free of Maya. Maya means this, again, false identification. There is something real, but I have identified it falsely. So I am thinking that the soul is the body. I am thinking that happiness means the pleasures of this body. It doesn't mean that there's no soul. If I think that the soul is the body, or I think myself is the body, it doesn't mean that there's no self. It means we've made a mistake identifying what it is. It doesn't mean that there's no ananda, no pleasure, no happiness. Because I made the mistake of thinking that it's just the pleasure of the senses of the body in contact with the material objects. No, I just made a mistake. I confused two things. And again, what I was telling you before is that's the real intelligent explanation of illusion. Confusing one thing for another. But if you say everything is one only, then you can't have illusion. You see? If everything is one only, then where does the illusion come from? Alright, so that was Mayavadi philosophy, old and new. Are there any questions? Yes?
I would like to ask about these forms of life in the spiritual world. Like we know there are around 8 million forms of life here. So is it the same in the spiritual world?
Well, the spiritual world, the material world is also, it's not only a reflection, but it's also a perverted reflection. So while the forms in this world are based on eternal spiritual forms, it doesn't mean that the forms here are looking identical to those forms in the spiritual world. Because there's this problem of perversion. That perversion is coming due to our own low-grade desires. So in Goloka Vrindavan, in Krishna's abode, there are four-legged, they're spiritual manifestations like Krishna's transcendental cows and deer and creatures like that. Nice creatures who are in this basic four-legged form. I shouldn't say creatures, they're just eternal spiritual manifestations. Here we also have deer and cows, but we have dogs too. Prabhupada said there are no dogs in the spiritual world. Why do we have dogs? Because a dog is a form of body that a human being who's become doggish, very degraded in his desires, that's a deserving form for him to attain in the next life. So it is based in general on this eternal form of being with four legs, as in the spiritual world. But this is a very low and twisted representation of it. Like crows also. There are no crows in the spiritual world. There are peacocks in the spiritual world. And other nice birds. We have crows because we have a crow mentality. You see? So therefore we have crows. So this is the meaning of perverted reflection. So you don't have to think, as they say, as a Latin phrase, quid pro quo, that what's here must be there. Exactly, identically. You have to remember the meaning of this term perverted reflection. Our consciousness here is perverted, not pure. So therefore, although it is reflection, it is an impure sort of reflection. Just like in a mirror. You see, if the mirror is bright and clean, then you'll get a clear reflection. But if the mirror becomes dusty, dirty, then the reflection is not so nice anymore. And this is going with phases of time. There are periods of time, particularly soon after creation, that period, the first day of Brahma, when the universe is brand new. And then the Vedic scriptures tell us that practically at that time this material universe was practically indistinguishable from Vaikuntha. At that time, you see, you find in the Vedas where Brahma created death later on, not in the beginning. There was no death in the beginning. That means the living entities got their bodies and they just went on and on and on with no fear of death. But the problem is because of the seed. Why are we here in this material world? Because of the seed of materialism. We want to enjoy sense gratification. We want to enjoy matter. So, because they were not afraid of death, they became very bold in their sensual enjoyments. And they began to multiply as a result. You see, so much sexual activity and so many new living entities coming out. And so the demigods complained to Brahma, population's getting too big, too many. These foolish living entities are becoming so enthusiastic to enjoy their senses because there's no fear. They have no fear of anything. So then Brahma, later on, he created death. And this world became Marchilo, haunted by death. So in the very beginning, and even this material universe was a very pure, it was a much purer reflection of the spiritual world than it is now. Yes?
Going on in this connection, can you say something about these people who are worshipping these kind of natural forces? Of course, there are various manifestations of that. But
Natural forces.
Are they also like kind of impersonal? In India?
Possibly. In traditional cultures, natural forces are understood to be persons. That everything is deified by a personality. Even they have sacred trees, sacred streams and waters, but they understand that there's a divine person. That was in Europe not too long ago, before Christianity. But this also tends to be polytheistic. They lose the touch with one Supreme Lord, and they start to think there are many, many gods or divine beings everywhere. This is called pantheon in Greek. Pantheon, theon means theos, God, and pan means everywhere. So gods everywhere. So that's the traditional form of worshipping the forces of nature. It is personalistic, but unless the acharyas have, to these people, acharyas have pointed out that this personalism is unfolding out of one supreme person, then they become demigod worshippers. So nowadays, yeah, they're I think in this New Age movement, things like that, then they may speak of natural forces in a more impersonal sense, I suppose. Actually, science does that. I think science is the best example. Science is all about natural forces, but totally impersonal. They want to describe the natural forces in terms of, mechanistic formulas, mathematics and so on, mathematics and physics. That's completely impersonal. And there's a kind of worship of it, because they say there's the really materialistic science, they say there's nothing beyond these natural forces. That's all there is ultimately. Yeah?
Good morning. How do we understand modern day Protestant Christianity, which has some concept of God and even some personal God of Jesus, but also state that that only by believing and not doing anything else you get saved. They have no discipline and they have no this detachment from matter. They are matter actually compound. Is it like some kind of melding between personalism and impersonalism?
Yes, that's a good point. Necessarily it is. Yeah, this distinction between personalism and impersonalism, or the theistic philosophy and Mayavada philosophy, it's not so black and white. There's a big gray area. Even in this Krishna consciousness movement is called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Bengali Vaishnavism, the Vaishnava religion from Bengal. But in Bengal you have all these shades. You see, you have the pure Vaishnavism as represented by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his Sampradaya, coming down to this present day. But then you have the Sahajas, Prakrita Sahajas. So they do many of the same things we do. They chant Hare Krishna and worship Krishna. Philosophically, you can see Mayavada philosophy has crept in. They have compromised with Mayavadi philosophy. And also simultaneously, they compromise with the sense gratification too. And so these are the people that have big kirtan. In Bangladesh in particular, they have what they call these Nam Yug, the sacrifice of the holy name. They come together, all these professional kirtan bands. They're very expert musicians, expert mridanga players, kartal players, and they sing, but it's also a show, you see. Some of them are even keeping a little chili powder in their dhoti wrapped up for the right moment to throw it in their eyes to make tears come. Now he's crying in ecstasy. And they roll around on the ground as if they're in ecstasy. And then at the end, they sit down to a big fish dinner. You see, the Bengalis are very fond of fish, but in the pure line of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you're supposed to give that up. But they'll eat fish, they'll smoke bees, they'll drink liquor, and they have their way of dismissing this. The way they dismiss it is that the world is illusion. You see, this world is illusion anyway. All we need is to chant Hare Krishna, and this illusion will go away. So therefore, it doesn't matter what you do actually in this world. You just have to be chanting and thinking of Krishna, whatever they think of. Yes.
Is there any benefit for those who have mixed these two things together? Do they get any benefit for the practice of this philosophy?
Yeah, there's benefit because somehow there's contact with Krishna. So they're committing, very grave sinful activities. But because there's connection with Krishna, they'll be led, closer and closer to the genuine Krishna consciousness. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that they will have to endure some suffering for the sinful things they've done. But there will be the opportunity for them to chant and to do devotional service to Krishna. So, yes, you brought up about Christianity in the West and the newer and newer forms of Christianity, and you see this same sort of thing. Because when you go back to Christianity as it was practiced 200, 300 years after Christ, when the church was forming, they were very, very, very strict. And from what I understand, it was one of the signs, speaking of diet, it was a sign of a Christian to be a vegetarian. In that at least they wanted to be very, very simple, and so to not eat meat was considered to be, a very pure way of life. And I've read about Christianity spreading in those early days in Greece and in Rome, and that would often be pointed out. Two things that other people in a town would know that someone has become a Christian because he would stop eating meat, and he would take a vow not to be married, or if they were already married, then they would stop sexual relations between themselves and just live as celibate, husband and wife together. And as soon as they would see that, they would know, they joined that sect. They're following that carpenter from Palestine. What a weird god to worship, a carpenter from Palestine. They're worshipping these big Jupiter, big powerful gods with thunderbolts in their hand. They worship some simple carpenter. What is this? And we're enjoying, we worship him. They bless us with, our gods bless us with so much pleasures. And for their god, they give up sex and they give up meat eating. What is this? This is very bad. But nowadays, I've met Christians who've told me that it is sinful not to eat meat. So that's, how far they've come. That if you're a real Christian, and in fact I remember we were in Berkeley, California when I was with Vishnu Jana Maharaj and His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And we were in front of the University of California at Berkeley, the gate entrance, and we were having kirtan. And some Christians came there, the fanatic kind. A few of them came. And when we were having kirtan, you could just see them, they were shouting, but you couldn't hear what they were saying, you just see their faces. But then when the kirtan would go down, then you could hear, and they were shouting, praise the Lord and eat the cow, praise the Lord. So that's, how far it's come. They're so compromised. Yes, and they have lost their philosophy also. I was just reading before I came up here about the early Christian philosophy. There was this, it's an interesting thing, his name was Origen, or Origenes, they say. Origenes. So he is the first great Christian theologian. He lived about 200 years after Jesus Christ. And he compiled the first, complete doctrine of Christianity. And for a few hundred years, what he had compiled there was accepted completely. He was considered the great acharya of philosophy for Krishna. And he taught that the soul is different from the body. The soul comes into this world, having left the Father's spiritual world, and according to its qualifications, it enters all forms of, different forms of life. Angelic forms means superhuman forms, human form, animal form, plant form. And one must become purified of this conception, I am the body, to go back to the spiritual world. And so this was actually the Christian, I was just reading it, and that's in the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is not some New Age kind of book. The secret of Christianity. No, this is just standard history. And they're describing for a few hundred years that he was the foremost scholar of Christianity. But then as they started to have their very violent debates with one another about what real Christianity is, and the things that gradually led to the whole, originally one church splitting up. And along the way this Origen was condemned. He was, by some emperor, I forget the name, Justinian maybe, he condemned him that his doctrine is false. That was a few hundred years later. And one of the reasons that they condemned Origen was the fact that he was saying that the real person is the pure spirit soul. And the official doctrine of the Christian church today is that the soul cannot exist without the body. And that at the end time when Jesus comes again, the bodies will be raised out of the ground. And the souls will be put back into them, and everyone will be judged. And some will go to hell forever, and some will go to heaven forever. You see? So the soul, in order to be a person, must be in a physical body. This is the official Christian doctrine. It was established at the Council of Trent at some point in the late Middle Ages. So Origen was saying, no, the actual person is pure spirit. And the body is just a covering, and we have to give up this identification with the body. So you see, as soon as they came back to this point, I am the body, then it was all lost. The original understanding. And that means if you think you're a body, then you think you have to have these bodily pleasures. And therefore, praise the Lord and eat the cow. That's what it comes to. Okay, anything else? Yes?
Yeah, something about Mayavada. In India, there were some great devotees like Mayavada. And like we hear from the history that when she got liberation, she just merged into Krishna. That's how they show. So how it is actually, how this philosophy is similar to, she was also a very great devotee of Lord Krishna.
Yes, well, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he departed this world, he entered into Tota Gopinath deity at Puri. And one of the great alwars in South Indian Vaishnavism, Andal or Goda Devi, she also merged into the deity of Lord Ranganath. But Vaishnavas don't understand this, that they became one, just the same as God. But through the deity, they passed into the Vaikuntha, into the spiritual world, and took up their eternal relationship with the Lord. So, about Mirabai, you see, I have not been able myself to ever study what she has written, and also from what I know, there's a lot of controversy about what poems or songs were really written by Mirabai and were not. So that's why Prabhupada said that she was a great devotee, but we cannot accept her as a great authority because there's not this parampara coming from her. When there's parampara, then you know exactly what the teaching is. But from her, the teaching is not clear. Okay, anything else? Yes? Okay.
Maharaj, when Prabhupada's disciples, they asked from him who are his Mayavadis, and Prabhupada told that you are those. So when he said so, and what's the medicine for this?
You said that Prabhupada, when he was asked who are the Mayavadis, Prabhupada said, you are. And then your question is, what's
the medicine for this?
What's the medicine?
Why he said so.
Why he said so?
Yeah.
Well, you can hear that in the pranam prayer to Srila Prabhupada. Nirvishesha shunyavadi pashichati shataram. He's come to these lands of Nirvishesha shunyavadi philosophy. These Western lands are fully sold out to Mayavada philosophy. Not this old form I was talking about. It's not the formal Buddhism, formal Advaita Vedanta. But the Western materialism, as we see here, is like why I gave this example, is monistic. Generally, it reduces everything down to matter. You see, and everything is just matter. That's the only one.